Have you ever told yourself you'll write when you finally have a free, full day? Or notice that you only make real progress on your thesis or dissertation when a deadline forces you into a writing sprint? Hey, co-authors. In this episode, we talk about how to reach, maintain, and succeed in a steady rhythm of writing. Let's dive in. So I want to start off by talking about the differences that I had in my experiences writing my thesis as opposed to my dissertation. So whenever I was writing my thesis, I was in a program that was a 1-year program. So you take 3 hours, then you take 15 hours, then you take 3 hours, and then you're done, right? So you get all of it done within basically 1 academic year. And while you're doing that, you had the choice of either doing a thesis or non-thesis option. I knew that I wanted to go on to get my doctorate. And so I decided that I was going to do the thesis option. And so, looking back, I'm just like, dude, what a poor choice. Like, my God, a master's program is hard enough doing a standard master's program where you're taking 9 hours at a time. But doing 15 hours in the fall and in the spring while trying to write a thesis was it was a Herculean task and one that I was honestly not prepared for and didn't really know what I was getting myself into. As a result, I didn't really start working on it in the fall because I didn't really know that I was supposed to. My advisor gave me some things to read. I read those over the winter break, and then I come back in the spring and they're like, hey, so how much have you gotten done on your thesis? And I'm like, well, I read the things you told me to read. And they're like, dude, it's January and you need to get done by the end of spring, which means that you honestly need to be done in March. So you've got 2 months to do an entire thesis. Okay, so now I'm behind the 8 ball. I'm stressed. I've got 15 hours of coursework that I'm taking. I've got my assistantship, so I'm working 20 hours a week as an assistant, and all of this starts to pile on, and I get to the point to where the only way that I feel like I can get things done is to continue to work far beyond my bedtime, to the point to where by the time it was probably March or April, whenever I was finishing up, I was staying up for about 36 hours at a time and sleeping 12 hours. So I was literally staying up for like a day and a half and then sleeping half a day and then doing that off and on. And as you can imagine, that was a horrible thing to do. It was bad for my mental health. I was barely hanging on in my classes. I was doing all the things wrong, right? Luckily, I did finish and everything was fine. The story has a happy ending, right? But an incredibly difficult time in my life. And a lot of that was because I didn't know what I was doing. I got in over my head very quickly. And instead of developing a very strong plan for how I was going to do my thesis and sticking to that plan and getting my thesis done, I just walked into it like I walked into writing any other paper for my classes, which is to say, I just waited until someone gave me the assignment and then I did the assignment. Let's contrast that with the way that I did my dissertation. By the end of my third year's spring semester, I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I started working on it then over the summer. I did my prospectus. And so for me, that was my first 3 chapters, my opening chapter, literature review and methods section, along with all of my IRB stuff. I got that all done in the spring of my 4th year because during the spring of my 4th year, I had applied for a job and had obtained that job ABD. So I knew that I was going to have at least another year to continue working on my dissertation while I was working at my job. And so I wanted to make sure that I got all my data collection done and all of that stuff ready and defended. All I needed to do was the last 2 chapters as I was heading into my first year of teaching. And even though it was very stressful because you're sitting there thinking to yourself, well, I cannot finish my dissertation, in which case I'm going to lose this job that I got. There was comfort in knowing that I had gotten a job. I was going to be okay. And as long as I got what I needed to get done, I was going to be okay. And that I had the summer, the fall, and the spring to get it done. And I could work backwards from, okay, I need to finish this in the spring. I need to get it done by March. And so how am I going to make sure that I finish these 2 chapters by the time that I reach that? So much easier time, A, because I had more time to do it, but B, because I knew at that point what I was looking at and working backwards on how I was going to achieve that within my time frame. As you're approaching your thesis or your dissertation, you too might be wondering to yourself, at this point, you've chosen your advisor, you've figured out what your topic is, and maybe you're even really excited about that topic and you've been wanting to study it for a long time, but it's important for you to figure out how are you going to make this a sustainable writing practice across the time that you have, whether that's across a year, across 2 years, across multiple years, for you to get your work done in a way that is not only going to enable you to have the best possible thesis or dissertation that you can have given your constraints. And I say it like that because we're not looking for perfect here. We're looking for the best that you can do under the circumstances in which you were given. So that's the first consideration. And B, how can you develop your foundation of sustainable writing practices now during this project. So that way you can build on those for the future, whether you're doing that thesis now and you need to build those practices into doing your doctoral program, or you're doing your dissertation now and you need to build those practices into being a professor. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how do we develop a sustainable writing process. So let's dive in.
Are you interested in mastering scholarly writing, developing productivity, and increasing impact, all while staying healthy? Then welcome to the Publishing Academic Research Podcast. My name is Dr. Kyle Ruddick, and I'm a full professor and writing coach who's dedicated to making sure you break through whatever is stopping you from reaching your scholarly goals. I meet so many scholars who have creative, innovative, and daring ideas, but can never seem to get those projects from proposals to print. I want you to get your work in the hands of people who will read it and appreciate it. So let's get into this week's big idea.
So the first thing I want to say before I get into the specific problems of developing a sustainable writing practice is that I think one of the most common pieces of advice that people give is sort of a double-edged sword whenever it comes to developing a good writing practice. And that is to say, a lot of people will tell you that you need to pick a topic that you're very passionate about, because by the end of the dissertation or by the end of your thesis, you won't be passionate about it anymore. You'll hate it. You'll never want to talk about it again. But it's the passion for that topic, that initial passion for that topic that you have, that's going to sustain you through the process. First off, and I've said this in other episodes, but I'll say it again, that is joyless, soulless advice to give someone. We should not be telling people, hey, pick something that you love and make the process of writing about it so miserable and so life-draining that by the end people hate it. Like, that is soulless, terrible advice that we need to stop giving to young writers. There is a difference between I've written all that I can about this thing and I feel exhausted on this topic for now, and I never want to look at this again because this has been such a traumatic experience. If you are telling your advisees, or as an advisee, if you have been told that, to me that's a total red flag. We should be celebrating people's curiosity and helping them nurture that through this process about whatever the topic it is. We should not be telling them to murder their puppies, kill their children, or whatever other stupid euphemism that people use in order to convince people that it's somehow okay for them to be in this dark, joyless place by the end of a project. That's bad advice, okay? So it is true that your interest and your love for your project is going to fluctuate. There will be times whenever you are 110% passionate about your project. Other times whenever it's really hard and you're thinking to yourself, man, if I just pick something else, maybe I would be in a better place. But the truth of the matter is that fluctuation is completely normal. And what's most important is for you to train yourself now before you get any further in your career, is just for you to sit down and work through the bad feelings and for you to work through the gunkiness that you might feel for a day or even for a week or a month, and really start to train yourself to desire to sit down and write and to be in a space of contemplation and meditation where you can celebrate this singular opportunity that most humans don't get on the planet, which is for you to just think and write and communicate those ideas to other people who are interested in hearing those ideas from you. That's a very rare space, and we should always be thankful for that. So typically I see three main problems whenever I'm working with people on their theses or dissertations. The first one is I see poor motivation to get things done. And this seems very weird because you would think that because you've been in a master's program or doctoral program that like by the time that you're to that ending project, you're like, oh man, I'm raring to go. I really want to get done with this. I feel very confident about this when I really want to get this done. And the thing is, like, yeah, everyone wants to get done and they can imagine that time whenever they're done with their program, but the actual steps that it takes to get done, that's whenever motivation starts to dwindle, because as you start to think about all of those little things that you have to do in a research project, you have to read and develop all of this literature. You need to gather and treat data. You need to come up with novel findings. You need to have impacts from those findings that actually convey new information to your audience and shows how you're adding to the body of literature in your disciplinary area. And then all of the sub-steps that go into that, like just think about your data gathering. If you're doing a social science report with interviews, for example, okay, now I've got to have 10, 20, 30, 50 interviews. I have to make time for those things. I have to have my hour, 2 hour, 3 hour interviews with them. I need to transcribe all that stuff. I need to code it. I need to be able to identify the most most relevant data, put those into thematic categories. Like there's just a lot of steps that go into that. So once people get hit with the reality of all of the stuff that goes into this project, it really starts to deplete their motivation to get things done. And so they get into this space where their productivity and their writing really depends on their mood. And so they'll say things like, well, I like waiting for those days that I really feel good about my writing, or, today I just didn't feel it today. And as they continue in this vein, then those low energy days where they don't want to write, and so they don't write, end up becoming low energy weeks, low energy months, or even years. And as the work that you should be doing piles up more and more, the mountain looks higher and higher, and eventually the combination of the actual amount of work that you need to do and all of the emotional baggage around you not doing it form into a Captain Planet of demotivation, right? Like all your powers have combined into making this way more powerful and way more demotivating than it would have been otherwise. Poor motivation typically hits folks that are unprepared for the long haul of what a thesis or dissertation project is. They approach it much like I did whenever I was a master's student as, oh, this is going to be pretty much just like a little bit of a longer class paper. And the amount of feedback that they get, revisions that they get, and the process that they have to go through and the elongated timeline of it really seems to sap people's motivation because they're not able to hit that immediate sense of success and achievement that they have been able to in their classwork. And so it's really important for you that if you're starting off a thesis or a dissertation, that you recognize that this is going to be a marathon and not a sprint, and that no matter how much success you've had in your class papers, those things in some ways will prepare you for this project, but your success in those things are not necessarily the strongest predictor of your success in these projects. Plenty of people go through all of their coursework just fine and then just hit the wall of a thesis or a dissertation, and then they never get their degrees. So it's important for you to remember that this process and this project is going to take longer, and that your motivation for that needs to be more long-term than what you're probably used to at this point. The second thing that I oftentimes see is students who engage in what I would consider to be an external locus of control whenever it comes to their writing. So, for example, as a graduate coordinator, I've had students who have complained about other faculty members who are like, oh, well, they're making me do too many revisions. Well, maybe your writing shouldn't be so bad then. Like if you spent the time to follow their advice and make sure that whenever they tell you to correct this specific problem here, that you go through your paper and correct it in all places where you've made that same mistake. If you took the time to do that, then you would find you would have less revisions and your work would proceed quicker. But you are under this idea that if I just get my work done quickly and get it back to my advisor quickly, that's somehow the right thing to do. And of course, whenever an advisor then says, well, no, your work's not up to par, you need to fix this, 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 and this, the more that happens, and again, especially whenever a student has previously been very successful in more short-term writing projects, this new experience of being told that your work is not good enough for this type of writing and that you need to work harder and to fix problems or errors that you might have been making the entire time but might have not been a problem in a class paper but now are a problem in a thesis or a dissertation. This becomes very threatening. And instead of internalizing that and saying to themselves, oh, I need to think about what I'm doing and take a step back, take the time to internalize this feedback and to really incorporate that into my writing practices going forward, they instead externalize that and think to themselves, oh, well, it's my advisor's fault. They're holding me back. I see a lot of folks engaging in this by saying things like, well, I'd like to get to my writing on this thesis or dissertation project, but my teaching's in the way, or my service, or my classes, or life, or whatever it might be. And while all of those things on some level might be true, right? You might be asked to do way too much of something for your department. You might have an illness, or illness might strike your family, right? Like there's a million and one things that can go wrong during this process that are in fact out of your control. But unfortunately, there's only so much that an institution can do to accommodate that. And while we might think of that as good, bad, or indifferent, the sad reality is that you have a deadline here, right? Like you have a deadline and your funding is going to run out, or your time and your recency is going to run out, or you're going to be in a job and then you don't finish and so you're going to get fired from the job, or you're not going to be able to go onto a doctoral program. Like there are very clear deadlines that you need to make. And so externalizing that and saying that these other things are the problem, that will only get you so far until people will look around and go, well, maybe you're the common denominator. And whether that's fair or not, and sometimes it's not fair, but whether that's fair or not, that's what's going to happen. And so externalizing that locus of control to things that are beyond you, again, is not a winning strategy. The other thing that I see is that a lot of people chalk up their success or failure in their dissertation or thesis project to like the dynamics or politics of their committees. So, oh, well, I can't get through because this one person on the committee is a jerk, or, oh, I can't get through because this person's always asking these questions. What I will say is, first off, if that is actually true, then you need to be having a very frank conversation with your advisor about how they should be protecting you. We'll talk about this more in the prospectus and final defense episode, but on some level, whenever you are at a defense, whether prospectus or a final defense, your advisor at that point has asked all the questions that they are supposed to ask in your revision process. Whenever they're in that defense, they should not be asking you questions. They should have asked that before you got to the defense. Their role in there is twofold: to take notes for you, so that way you don't have to. You can answer questions, and then the advisor then can take the notes to make sure that you have a running log of the things that you need to do or address. B, they should be the ones who argue with other committee members about why you made the choices that you did, because on some level, they co-signed on you making those choices. That's why you're at the defense, because they said that you were ready. And if they're not doing that for you, then you either need to find a different advisor or you need to go to complain to your chair, because that's nonsense. Anyway, so whenever a person says, oh, well, I can't get through because of these committee politics, and their advisor hasn't done anything, it might be because their advisor is not doing what they're supposed to. Or it might be that it's actually not the committee politics that are the problem. Your advisor actually agrees with that person who has been asking you very pointed questions, and it has nothing to do with the fact that that person likes you or dislikes or likes another person on the committee. It has actually to do with the content of what it is that you're writing. But externalizing that into some grand and nefarious scheme against you takes that out of your locus of control. And so instead of you saying, they've asked me questions and here's how I can prepare for that, you just say to yourself, well, I can't prepare for it because these things are out of my control. That's not going to help you. The last thing that I see is what I would consider to be poor efficacy on the part of students. What I mean by that is that a lot of folks might start off with the idea of, I'm excited about this project. I feel like I can do it. I've got the tiger by the tail. Everything's going to go my way. I'm going to get this done. I'm going to graduate. But as they move on, their belief in their ability to do it starts to erode. And that might be because, again, they may have never received a lot of feedback or a lot of corrective feedback from their teachers on their writing up into this point. Now all of a sudden they're being asked to do a lot of revisions. They had thought to themselves, I'm going to write chapter 1 and then I'll be done with that. And then I'm going to write chapter 2. And then all of a sudden, whenever they're on their 3rd, 4th, 5th revision of chapter 1, and they haven't even made progress on chapter 2 yet, they start to get really antsy about their timeline. Now all of a sudden they start to engage in self-doubt. And so they get into a space of practices that I think are the most destructive in many ways, which is things like caffeine-fueled bursts of writing. Going back to my own example where I was staying up for 36 hours and then sleeping for 12 hours, like I was drinking so many energy drinks and Mountain Dews and anything else that I could get my hands on to stay hyped up and caffeinated, that by the time that those 36 hours were over, then I was just crashing. Right? I was just absolutely exhausted. I couldn't even think straight. I was just collapsing in my bed. And then I would sleep for so long because I was just utterly exhausted. Then I'd get up. I'd feel like utter crap. And so what do? Well, then you start pounding some more Monster drinks or Red Bulls or whatever, so that way you can get yourself hyped up. All those things are coping strategies born out of a deep-seated nagging doubt that you are going to be able to finish this. And so you find yourself engaging in increasingly risky and increasingly destructive habits to try to flog yourself into productivity, when in actuality, if you just sat down and written for an hour or two a day, you probably would have been far more ahead and certainly a whole lot healthier about things. But now instead, you've created this absolutely torturous process for yourself, and you're not getting work done, or you're not getting it done as quickly as you need to. And you're now giving yourself poor mental health and maybe even poor physical health as a result of it. And so together, I would say these three things, right? Poor motivation, an external locus of control, and poor self-efficacy. All those things are related to how you orient yourself towards your project, and ultimately have their root in, have you prepared yourself mentally for what it takes to do this long process of writing and revision in order for you to get done. And the first step to that is going to be building sustainable practices for you to get your work done. So let's talk about that. The first thing I would say is that it is important for you to pinpoint when you need to be done by, or when you want to be done by, and start to work backwards from that. Realize that your graduate college probably has a date for your final draft that might be before the actual end of the semester. And so, like in my case, mine was due in March. Well, but also my committee needs to have 2 weeks to read it. So mid-March now becomes March 1st. So whenever I come back to school in my spring semester of my master's program, and it's already January 15th, I literally got 2 months to write an entire thesis. So if I had been smart about it, I would have worked backwards from the very moment that I knew that I was going to do a thesis, which was pretty much as soon as I got into the program, because I knew that I wanted to go on to get a doctorate, and started to work on it as soon as I hit the ground. Instead, I waited way too late, and then by that time, it was just trying to get things done as quickly as possible because I needed to make this deadline. But it's not just about figuring out that final deadline and working backwards from that. It's thinking about all of the steps that you're going to have here. So whenever you think to yourself, I need to write a literature review. Okay, well then how many articles do you need? How many articles do you think that you're going to need minimally or maximally for you to get your literature review done? Okay, count those out. I've got 40, 60, 80 articles that I have to read. What does that look like in terms of a timeline? If you read one a day, that's not going to work out for you. You're going to have to read faster than that. You've got other coursework to do. You've got other things going on in your life. How are you going to find the time to do that? So are you going to do that a couple every day, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays? Are you going to use every Saturday and Sunday? Really thinking to yourself about the specificity of how you're going to write, what your output of that's going to be. Are you going to take notes on them? Are you going to write up summaries of them? And developing an ongoing catalog of the things that you're reading in order for you to have that for your literature review, but also to get it done in a timely fashion. Same thing with the actual design of your research. Again, if you're doing social science work, for example, I'm going to have to find participants. I'm going to have to give them the survey or do the experiment or do the interviews or conduct an ethnography, whatever it is, right? And so getting the people, getting them the data, getting the data back, treating that data, analyzing it, all those different things, all of those are different steps in this. You can't just write in your calendar, well, you need to have results chapter done by this day. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's going to lead up into that chapter. And so if you start to think about how you're going to spend every day, the time that you know that you're going to have available on those days, how you're going to be working at it, and how you're going to use it is going to help you stay on track and make sure that you're just doing the regular routine maintenance of working on your thesis or dissertation project. The second thing to think about is whenever you're doing your work, how are you spending your time whenever you're writing? So many people that I work with fall into this trap of, well, if I don't have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of absolutely free time, then I can't get any writing done. There are times whenever that's true. There are times whenever you know that you need to be able to sit down for an extended period of time in order for you to write. But that's not every time. There's times whenever you're getting literature for you to read this time or the next time that you get to sit down. There's times whenever you're just reading that literature. There's times whenever you're talking to your advisor about your project. There's times whenever you can write this particular section or that particular section. There are 1,000,001 little tasks that go into having a thesis or a dissertation, and not all of them require long extended periods of time for you to do them. So making sure that you're using a good rule, whether that's, a lot of people say that like 52 minutes to work, 17-minute break, or thereabouts 50-20 or whatever it might be. Or if you do like the, Pomodoro or other types of things like 25 minutes of work, 5 minutes break, however you want to slice it. I think in many ways it's less important what the exact formula is for you and more important that you're making sure that you're being sustainable. So I know if I only have 30 minutes, okay, then it's 25 minutes on, 5 minutes break. If I have 2 hours. Okay, well then maybe I do 50-20 or 50-10, right? Like whatever it might be for you. But that way you're making sure that you're keeping yourself accountable and that you're keeping a rhythm that goes and make sure that you're being sustainable. The third thing that I would say is it's important for you to externalize other things in your life where you can. I know that this is not possible for everyone. Some people have partners. Some people have parents that are willing to help. Some people have the money to pay for outside help, whatever it might be. What I will say though is that if you can find a way to externalize something to someone else, do so. Those types of people in your life are worth their weight in gold. Even if it's just, hey, once a month, I'm going to pay someone else to come in and clean my apartment. I mean, that's going to cost you maybe $100-$150, depending on how dirty you are and how big your apartment is. But I can tell you the difference between coming home from riding all day and looking at a stack of empty pizza boxes and half-drank Red Bulls and a toilet that looks like it hasn't seen a brush in 6 weeks. Like all those things are just going to be more energy depleting for you because you're going to look at that and go, oh God, I should do something about that, but I'm just so tired and I'll do it tomorrow. And then you don't do it tomorrow and then you feel even worse about it. So where available, it's important for you to externalize things. Even you setting aside $100, $150 a month just to have someone come in and clean up your house will be worth it in the long run. I think overall, it's important to recognize that regularity in this case is going to beat intensity. Up until this point, it's most likely that most of your writing has been intense writing. You've been writing for a particular class, and whether that's been very structured, where you've had small bits of that writing across a semester and then it's built up into a final project, or it's just a paper that's due at the end of the semester. There's a intensity to that short-term 16-week writing that's been ingrained in you over the course of your college career, probably as an undergrad, maybe even into high school. At this point, you have never most likely written on something for over a year. And so it's really important for you to be respectful of that process, to be mindful of it for yourself and how it's going to affect you, and to forgive yourself whenever it feels like it's the hardest. I think that all too often, the students who do theses and dissertations are the ones who have up until this point been incredibly successful, and having anything less than that success given to them over and over again feels like a failure. And that is a recipe for disaster. It's going to make you doubt yourself. It's going to demotivate you. And eventually you're going to start externalizing that to other people, and you're going to feel like you don't have any control over your project or maybe even over your own life. That's going to lead you to not finishing your thesis or dissertation and ultimately make sure that you're not successful in your program. I'll say one last thing, which is that I think a lot of people who are writing their thesis or dissertations, because they have not developed a very good practice for writing long term, they feel like the practices that they've been using for writing class papers are the ones that they need to use. And whenever those aren't successful, they're completely bereft of direction on how to be successful. And so it's important for you to start practicing now what it looks like for you to be writing regularly, getting feedback regularly, and then revising regularly. Is that writing in a new place? Is that writing with music on or not music on? Is that having food around or not having food around? Like, what is it that might have to be different in order for you to be successful? And you might have to experiment. And it might be that you try a couple of things out before you land on whatever it is that's successful for you. That's okay. It's more important for you to forgive yourself whenever you're not successful in trying different things out than for you to do the same thing that you've always done, end up not being successful in that, and then just hitting your head against the wall and, self-flagellating about how you must be a failure and how you're so stupid and how everything is so wrong because the things that you've done in the past aren't working for you now. It's okay that they're not working for you now. It's a different type of writing, a different type of project. Now is the time for you to build this new set of writing skills, these long-term writing skills rather than short-term, because ultimately that's what's going to help you if you're going from a master's program to a doctoral program, and especially going to be helpful if you go from a doctoral program into the professorate, where that's your life now, is long-term writing. You've got the next 20, 25, 30 years of writing, and so you being able to sustain yourself across months, years, or even decades of a research program is what's going to separate you from being a successful professor from being an unsuccessful one. So I think that's going to about wrap it up for me, folks. folks. I appreciate you listening. This is part 3 of a 10-part series on writing theses and dissertations. So if you haven't, you can go check out the other 2 episodes on this. I also have a bevy of other episodes on writing different types of research, writing paragraphs, and then also just general advice on working through the emotional and social problems that always arise whenever you're doing long-term writing. If you're listening to my episodes and you think of something that you'd like to have answered but I haven't addressed yet, by all means, reach out to me. My contact information is in the description of the podcast. I'm always interested to know what it is that you all want to hear and what you want to listen to and what you need help with, because it's important to me that I'm making this the best podcast that it can be to help you with your writing and make sure that you're writing the things that are going to make you excited and get in the hands of the people who are going to read it, love it, and cite it themselves. Okay, so thank you again, and I will see you in next week's episode.
Hey, co-authors, what's stopping your best ideas from becoming your next big publication? Brilliant research shouldn't die in your drafts folder. Now's the time to bridge the gap between the possible and the published. You can support this podcast by subscribing to it, leaving a positive review, assigning it to your classes, or sharing it with a colleague. Let me know what I can do to make this the best podcast resource for you. And if you'd like to know more about my writing coach services, then you can find my information in the podcast description and set up an appointment. I'll be back next week with another episode. But until then, keep healthy, keep writing, and don't let reviewer 2 get you down.